A very good afternoon to you. Now, with a renewed focus on careers delivery in schools and colleges across the country, present in a number of different things, whether we're looking at the Ofsted Thematic Review, Education Select Committee, or the new kind of primary careers programmes, it's safe to say this is a pretty good topical time for us to talk to the two authors of the new edition of the Careers Leader Handbook. And that is exactly what we're going to be focusing on in today's show. But we'll come to that a little bit later. First of all, a very warm welcome to We Are Careers. If you're only joining us for the first time, this is your topical fortnightly snippet of CPD for careers professionals across the UK and beyond, led by myself, Chris Webb. I'm a higher education careers practitioner, member of the CDI, and of course, my wonderful co-host, as always, Sabiha. So how are you doing today, Sabiha? Are you having a good start to this week, or a good middle to this week?
Do you know what? I can't even believe we're in February. Is anybody else feeling as if where did January go? If you do, use the comments and let us know. Has, sort of kind of 2023 kind of, is it whizzing past you? Are you sort of like, what kind of careers, projects, programs, activities are you creating? Because we'd love to hear about that. And as Chris mentioned, today the theme is very much going to be about what do careers leaders need to know in order to run an effective careers program. And in order for us to sort of kind of answer this question, we've got two huge titans. And as Chris mentioned, the new book is out. If you haven't already got your hands on it, we'll be dropping links of where you can get a copy of that. And that's what's going to be the theme of today. Now, perhaps maybe you're watching right now and you're thinking, I don't work in a school, but perhaps you're working in an organisation. I have to say, when I got my first edition copy, I actually wasn't working in a school at the time. Yet so many of the tools, and we're going to be talking about practical aspects of how you apply the theory, what's in the book today with our fabulous guest today, was really useful. So do make sure that you stay tuned. And for our viewers who are our loyal followers, thank you so much for joining us today. But if you're new, as Chris said, to the show, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button on whatever platform that you're watching us, because we really do want to serve you. Yes, you are amazing, fabulous career practitioners out there doing fabulous things. My name is Sabiha, for those of you who don't know me, and I work internationally and I help young professionals get unstuck and get back into career flow without the stress. And I also am the creator of the I Am Thriving Career Coaching Program, where I teach international career coaches help their clients create even more powerful transformation without wasting resources on time and tools that don't work. So let's dive into today's show. But before we do that, we always like to celebrate, yes, you, the fabulous career practitioner. So Chris, who are we celebrating today as part of the Careers Cheers?
Thanks, Sabiha. Yeah, so I guess our Careers Cheers for this week will probably surprise no one if you were kind of quite active on LinkedIn last week. So we'll kind of come on to that in a second. First of all, we just want to continually keep plugging our kind of careers impact hashtag. So this is the hashtag from the CDI that ideally we're wanting kind of professionals to use to share impact that you're making with clients or with the organizations or the stakeholders you're working with. So just a reminder, when you're kind of sharing those great LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram posts, whatever platform you happen to be on, do make sure you're using that careers impact hashtag. And it leads very nicely on to our main careers cheers for this week, which involves another hashtag. Now, last Wednesday, 1st of February, many of you who are kind of on social media, particularly on kind of LinkedIn and Twitter, may have been involved in the So Much More Than Talking About Jobs campaign. So this was a sort of viral flash mob campaign put together by Bella Doswell and Catherine Jennick, who many people may be connected with on LinkedIn. And it was all about providing kind of multiple examples of why careers work is so much more than talking about jobs. So that is our Careers Cheers number 2, our main Careers Cheers for the week. And a big thank you to Bella and Catherine for sort of spearheading that, and obviously to the CDI as well for supporting that. And in fact, all of the organisations and all of the professionals, not just within the careers sector, but beyond, who shared that and who supported that campaign. At last kind of time of asking, I think, they've been impacted 880,000 people, I think, through LinkedIn alone. So, huge number of impressions, huge number of people using that hashtag, and more of that data and more information on that campaign to follow over the coming months. So, yeah, massive kind of thank you to Catherine and Bella for spearheading that, and to everyone who's involved for kind of sharing that message. It's a super, super important message. So, yeah,
Chris, sorry, Chris. Chris, I'm just jumping in there. If anybody's got excited and thinking, oh my God, I missed that. Where was I? What was that all about? And have got excited and want to get involved, what's the best way that people can get involved with that? Who are sort of kind of keen to support this?
Yeah, so as we said, the hashtag is so much more than talking about jobs. It's on LinkedIn, it's on Twitter. Simply search for the hashtag. You'll be able to find all the posts. Follow that hashtag and you'll be able to see what people have been posting over the last week. Some of it's still going on. We've had sort of people posting from Canada, Singapore, USA, UAE, huge range of different countries within there. So yeah, lots to kind of view, lots to catch up on if you've not come across that yet.
Oh, I love it. I love the fact that it's got an international vibe as well. Oh, thanks for that, Chris. Loving those career cheers. And perhaps, if you want to join us in celebrating this, drop, a clap emoji or some celebration careers cheers hashtag in the comments now whilst you're watching live, or if you're watching on the replay, so that you can join in with the celebration, because this community of career practitioners, including ourselves, do amazing work, as do you, our viewers. And it's important that we take time out to celebrate and highlight all the good practice that is taking place, because it's so easy, isn't it, to sort of kind of fall into the sort of kind of doom and gloom of life. And yet, we should step out and take time to celebrate. So today's topic is all about, what do careers leaders need to know in order to run an effective careers program? If you have questions for our guests, again, use the chat box feature, drop those questions in for us. We'll make a point of making sure that we get those questions to our fabulous guests. So I want to head over to David first. David, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and the work that you do before we dive into the book, the new release of the new book?
Yeah, sure. Hi everybody. Looking forward to this discussion. Well, I started my career teaching and did 10 years in a secondary school, of which the last 5 I was what is now called a careers leader. At the time I was called head of careers. And I've then spent the next 30 plus years supporting careers leaders, supporting the development of careers education and guidance work in schools, mainly by providing training courses, but also writing guidance materials, offering policy advice in various contexts, and undertaking bits of research. I stopped full-time work about 5 years ago, put everything I'd learned into a book with Tristram, the first edition of the Careers Leader Handbook. But I've carried on just doing little bits and pieces over the last 5 years, principally offering consultancy to the Careers and Enterprise Company on the Careers Leader Training Programme. I banged on for about 40 years about the need for training for this job, and they introduced it just at the point I was thinking of retiring, so I couldn't let it go. So I'm hanging around offering consultancy to them on that and doing a few other bits and pieces, not least updating the handbook.
They're not letting you go, are they, David? They just keep reeling you back in. Every time David's like getting ready to retire, he's like, nope. They sort of kind of bringing him back in, aren't they? And funnily enough, we've just had a comment, David, in the chat just now as well, saying great to see. So we've definitely got some fans here, both of you today, David and Tristram, thought leaders, expert, deep thinkers, providing crucial insights into the CEIAG as the world of careers evolves and changes. Thank you all for all that you do for this community. That's Liz Reese giving you a huge support and shout out. And I just want to also bring in, before I come over to you, Tristram, Daniela War. Was just saying, when I was asking people to sort of kind of feedback and update, what are they working on this year? She is planning an employability conference on March the 9th. Well, congratulations, Daniela, for getting out there and making this employability conference happen, and good luck with it all, and keep posted how it goes. So Tristram, I want to come to you. For those of our viewers who don't know you, perhaps maybe we want to learn more about what you're doing in 2023, Tristram. Please do share with our audience.
So I'm Tristram Hooley. I'm a researcher working primarily at University of Derby, but also I've got a base in Norway as well. So I work at the Inland Norway University. And I'm interested in careers across the life course. So I'm currently working on a project with the Gatsby Foundation looking at adult career guidance, doing some work with the International Labour Organization, looking at career management skills in low and middle income countries. So I'm doing lots of things, but probably most of my work, or the biggest proportion of my work, has been focused on schools And so, and a lot of it's been working with David on careers leaders and on the Gatsby benchmarks in schools and so on. And that's an ongoing focus, and I'm still very much involved in all of that as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tristram. And very topical on the adult guidance as well. Links a little bit to one of our news items at the end, so we'll perhaps come back to that. But as Sabiha mentioned, it's already time to kind of jump straight into the topic. And, I think, as you mentioned there, David, it's been almost 5 years since the original book, the first edition of the Careers Leader Handbook first came out. We have the new edition here. So I guess a good place to start is what sort of changed, really, how the landscape's changed for careers leaders since that first book, and how the book, I guess, has changed to reflect that. So if I come to you first, David, if that's okay, what can we find in the book, or what can kind of careers leaders find in the book, and how is it different, I suppose, to the first edition?
There's probably a 4-year period between the publication of the first edition and the second one. We're in the 5th year now, but when we started working on it, it was 4 years after the first one had been produced. The landscape had changed a bit, not in a major way. We've still got this, and I think we're still reeling from the shock of 10 years ago of a major change in the provision of career guidance for young people, particularly working schools, with the closure of Connections. And we went, after 40 years of a partnership approach with an external service, to giving sole responsibility over to schools. And I think we're still adjusting and coping with that, not least because we weren't helped by the fact that although schools got the responsibility and additional responsibility, there's not had the resources and very little support at the time for that. So there's no major changes. We're still working with that model, but I think we're learning a lot more about how that model works and how we can make it effective. So it's the new edition partly reflects what we've learned over the last 4 or 5 years of how do we make this model work effectively, and the crucial role of a careers leader and how they can be effective in their role. The landscape has changed, so we've updated bits on that. Legislation has changed. The requirement to provide independent career guidance has been extended, so it's now a statutory requirement in academies as well as local authority maintained schools. The age range has been brought down to year 7. I suppose the biggest change in the legislation has been the extension of the Baker clause, so that's required some rewriting of that bit where we've talked about encounters with learning providers. Those are the main changes I think that's been in the landscape. I can talk about some of the other changes that we've made to the book. I'll leave some of the space for Tristram.
Can I just come in on another change that I think is an important one in the landscape, which is the introduction of the CDI framework, which I think has been, so that is, it's a revision of the CDI framework, but I think it got a little bit into the background by the time that we brought it back during, I think it was about 2020 when we refreshed that. And so that's a framework which is setting out a series of learning outcomes which a careers program is trying to achieve. And where we got to is that we've got a very strong framework for what you should be doing, which is the Gatsby benchmark. So you should have some careers education, you should have some advice and guidance, you should have some work experience and so on. But I think we hadn't said enough about what the learning outcomes of, what are young people going to get out of that. And so the CDI framework, which was revised in 2020, gives us that in a much clearer way. And so from a point of view of a careers leader, as David said, there are all these kind of pressures and pushes and pulls on you from policy. But in terms of having a kind of clearer tool about what you're trying to do, careers leaders are now in a very strong position because they know what they're trying to do, and hopefully they now know what they're trying to do, why they're trying to do it, or what they're trying to achieve through that. So that, I think, makes a big difference as well.
I think it's a really good point. It brings us nicely back to your point, actually, David, I think, around sort of what's in the book this time around. And, sort of reading through it earlier, I think one of the key messages right at the beginning that comes through is about this is a practical resource. It's not just lots and lots of theory you can read about what it might mean to be a careers leader from different research perspectives, although there is, research from a variety of sources in there to back up a lot of what's being said. But I think the key thing is, even looking at the beginning, is the use of those icons, linking back the different aspects of where Gatsby fits in, how it can relate to each section. So for kind of careers leaders who maybe are on the fence about buying the book, or they're maybe about to buy the book, what are the kind of key things in there from a practical perspective, I guess, that careers leaders will be using within the book to help them inform the work that they're doing?
I mean, you're quite right, Chris. It's written very much as a practical guide. I mean, that's what we see. We see it as a practical tool for careers leaders who've got the job of leading and managing their careers programs in their schools. We also see it as a textbook for the careers leader training program. But as you say, throughout it, we've put in various tools that people can use. So not only do we just write in the chapter about what good practice might be and some things to think about at each stage. That's another actually addition that we've made in this in the new edition, is we've consciously put review and reflection questions at each stage to say, okay, you read this bit, that what I call the so what question, which I think is the most important question on any CPD session. So what? We've sat and listened to this, or in the case of this, we've read the book. What are we going to do? What's happening where we are? What would be right to us? What would be the next steps we ought to be taking? So the very practical questions in there to say what next. And then some of the tools to say, right, if that is something you want to work on, here's a tool that can help you review and think through what some of the options might be for the future. I think one other thing I'll say in terms of how the content has evolved is we did consciously ask lots of users of the first edition for their feedback. We took that into account. And one of the things that people will notice now is there's far more attention, explicit references to work with in SEND contexts. We did pay attention to that last time, but probably not enough. And so it's not just for the mainstream school, it's for the SEND school as well.
Fantastic, thanks, David. And I'm going to let Sabiha come back in a second. I know we've got some comments in the chat to pick up, but Tristram, just anything to add there, I guess, from the sense of how careers leaders are going to be using this sort of practically, or how they can use it practically? Because I think there's a really good point about saying, this isn't something you want sitting on a shelf. It wants to be hopefully, dog-eared within sort of a few months. People are using it so much.
I mean, it is a practical book. It's got lots of ideas in it, lots of case studies and examples. We've also got some resources online that you can download that give you things like lesson planning tools and those kinds of things. But I suppose the other audience for it is people who are doing these the careers leader training programs who might want a bit more detail. So in the book we've put them at the end. So there's end notes which have got the more sort of academic references and so on. So if you are doing one of those courses, especially if you're looking and doing it as some kind of qualification, then you might also find the book useful from that point of view as well, I think. So yeah, there's lots of stuff in it. I mean, there's lots of stuff that's from the previous version, but I think we were actually surprised how much had changed. And so we've been through, there's new web links, lots of new information. I mean, 5 years is, even without a kind of major fundamental change, it's quite a long time in education policy. I mean, if we just counted the number of education secretaries we've had in that period, I think we're getting close to double figures now. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, education secretaries, really, we've had a lot. So
I think maybe 9 or 10 in that period.
Something like that.
Better not thinking about, but I mean, really important points. And again, we'll come back to this just before the end. We've flashed up a link to kind of show you where you can kind of check out the book and get it. But it really is worth making that point that, as both Tristram and David said, flicking through the book, what's kind of quite apparent is the user experience element of it is to kind of try and make sure that it's directing you to the information you need. And although there's references, as we've heard, to kind of the academic and the research side of it, at its heart, it's a practical tool. So I think that's it's a really important point to mention. Sabiha, I'll give you a chance to jump in. I know we've got quite a few comments in the thread, and I know we've got some other things to pick up with our guests. So over to you.
We have. Thank you for that, Chris. And I'm loving the fact that both Tristram and David are sparking conversation. And what I'm also loving as well is the whole host within the audience of networking that's going on, where colleagues, unknown to each other right now, are now connecting with each other. So Sarah Clifford brought in a question saying that she provides career guidance in her local NHS. Delighted to hear from both Tristram talking about adult IAG. There are so many challenges and rewards working in the adult area, particularly in the public sector. If anyone else is doing, and she asked, and she put a shout out to say if anybody else is doing career guidance in the NHS and would love to get in, she'd love to get in touch. And already Daniela was like, yep, would love to speak to you. And so there's that connection going on. And this is exactly why, sort of kind of Chris and I created this concept of the show, because we wanted to sort of kind of create this sense of community, of good practice, and bringing on fantastic, sort of kind of guests like we have today, two titans, Tristram and David, talking about the latest version of the Careers Handbook as well. Another Facebook user shared, the increased emphasis on learning outcomes is very welcome. So David, that seems to be really resonating with our audience today. Always part of the quality and career standard assessment, and now much more integrated into Gatsby material, and of course your new book. So that clearly seems to be, both of you seem to be on the right sort of kind of journey with that, because our audiences and our fellow practitioners who are in the thick of it doing the day-to-day job are really sort of kind of appreciating that as well. Sarah's just gone on to say, I have the previous version of the book, but feel another purchase coming on. Okay, I think Ka-ching Trotman might be very happy about that today. I think we just might have made a sale there. Thank you, Sarah. It's glad to see. One thing that I will say, and we've sort of kind of talked about, and both of you, Tristram and David, have talked about how, the book wasn't designed to just sort of kind of sit on a shelf and just collect dust. It's very much designed as a practical how-to to help. What would you say if you had to sort of highlight, and I know this might be a bit tricky because there's so much goodness, there's so much sort of kind of, knowledge bombs being dropped in that book, but if you had to pick, say, one thing, one benefit that that will provide the reader, what one challenge will it help the reader solve in the day-to-day work that they do? And Tristram, if I come to you first and then I'll come to David second. Oh, Tristram, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
right.
Obviously it's going to depend a bit on who the reader is. I suppose our kind of primary reader for this is somebody who gets given the job of careers leader, or even actively seeks it out for themselves because they think it might be interesting, but really doesn't know where to start. And I think what we do in the book is we lay the terrain. This is the kind of stuff that you're going to be doing. These are the issues you need to think about. And that's both in terms of what your school's program should look like, but also what your workload should look like, what what the responsibilities are, and so on. So I think if you're someone who's kind of got no clue, then you may not get into all the details straight away, but what it does do is it lays the terrain. If you're somebody who has been doing this job for a while, you're unlikely to have done all of it equally well. So there'll be areas of weakness. So maybe you've got into the job, you started doing it, you feel like you know what you're doing in terms of employer engagement, but you don't really understand what the careers advisor you're working with is actually doing. So we've got some stuff on that. Or maybe you want to think about the evaluation stuff a bit more. And so I think it's both, it's the breadth of it is laying out the terrain, and then there's a bit of depth on quite, well, we've got a chapter for each benchmarks. We've also got things on things like providing CPD for your colleagues, on evaluation, and then breaking down the role of the careers leader as well. So there'll then be deep dives that people can go into if there are particular areas. And you don't have to read this kind of book from front to back. You might well just, dive into the bit that interests you, and that's all you need to look at. So hopefully that gives people a bit of a sense of the kind of book it is.
Yeah, I love that, Tristram. And I would agree with you, because the first edition for me, I didn't read it to page, cover to cover. I literally dived in. There were certain chapters that I knew where my knowledge was a little bit sort of kind of, there was gaps there. So I jumped into those chapters first and then sort of kind of went back. So eventually I did end up reading the whole book, but just not necessarily in chronological order. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I love what, Tristram, what you said as well, is that there's something in the book for everybody. So whether it's somebody that's new, that's studying, becoming a careers leader and starting their journey in the profession, or perhaps has come into the profession from doing something else, to somebody who's more advanced, who's actually been in the profession, been doing work, but now has, as Tristram said, got some gaps and is thinking, right, okay, I've nailed this part of the careers leader's delivery, but this area is not so great, and you can sort of dip into the book. David, coming to you now, what would you say is your sort of kind of one area, one sort of kind of suggestion or tip that you feel that people can take away from this book that you'd like to highlight today to the audience?
Right, well, I fully agree. It's not a book necessarily for reading from cover to cover. I think only 3 people have read it cover to cover. That's Tristram, me, and the person who was doing the proofreading. what I would do is read the contents page. I know that sounds silly, but look at the contents page, look what's in there, and decide where should you go in. Just as Tristram said, I mean, I would take people either to section 1 or section 3 to start. Why those ones? Section 1, because it's an introduction, and you say, I'm new to all of this. I need to just get my head around what it's all about. That's what section 1 does, and then I can go into the relevant bit for me. Section 3 is a bit I feel quite passionately about, is that it's all about the leadership role. And I just have always believed that none of this will you get right in a school unless you get the right leadership arrangements for it in the first place. So, and that's what we go into in some depth in section 3, particularly the beginning of that section, to say, what are some of the things you need to take account of when you're setting up a leadership arrangement for making this model work? We're the only country in the world that has this model of a school-based model designed in this way. And so how do we get that right? And then when you've thought about what you want to work on your program, that's when you go into section 2. So, right, yes, I need to know more about how I work effectively with my careers advisor on personal guidance. Yes, I need to look at more about how I have my encounters with learning providers. Whatever it is that you decide is the next priority for you to work on. You can't work on it all at once. What's the one you want to work on? Just as I'm just conscious of time, there's 2 other things I'd say that are features of the book that we haven't mentioned in this second edition. One is that there's a lot more here for an audience that's outside of England. And I'm sure that some people listening into this might be working in another context. We noticed, or Trotman noticed, that there were an increasing number of sales of people in other parts of the world, particularly those who are interested in the Gatsby benchmarks and adopting them and adapting them for their context. So you'll find in each chapter there's an international perspective that's been added to it. And the other thing I'll say is perhaps careers leaders are not always good at looking after their own careers. And so there is a chapter towards the end, which I've never seen in any other book of this nature, which is, what about looking after your own career and what might be next for a careers leader? So I point people to that as well.
No, that's brilliant, David. I mean, I think that's exactly the sort of thing that we found has come up sort of within these shows before, is around actually how do you manage your career as a careers professional? And of course, that's, yeah, as you said, equally true for careers leaders as it might be for kind of career development professionals. So, yeah, fantastic reflections. Again, you know, David's mentioned we're short on time. We always mention we're short on time. So as we're short on time, I'm just going to remind you again that if you want to kind of check out the Career Leaders Handbook, or the Careers Leader Handbook, I should say, we've flashed the link up on the bottom of the screen. So this is the link to the Trotman site. It does say coming soon. They've just not updated the URL. This does take you to the direction of the book. So do check that out. Yeah, you can purchase the book through there if you want to kind of buy a copy, or if you just want to read a little bit more about the copy itself. And of course, if you want to kind of get in touch or kind of follow the work that Tristram and David are doing, you can find both of them on LinkedIn, and Tristram also via his blog site, Adventures in Career Development. Tristram, anything else you want to plug whilst you're on here before we?
No, I mean, just to say, I mean, you can keep up with me on social media. I'm all over it, and I'm on the blog site is where I put most of my stuff. I put slides and things, and people can use them. But I'm also really interested in hearing people's stories. So if somebody wants to write, a piece for our blog about how they've worked with some of these ideas, or even why they think something that we've said in the book is not the best way to go, I think we're very interested. We really did listen last time to some of the feedback that we were given. We've been out and talked about this with a lot of people. And so, yeah, it's really helpful. So please get in touch with me. And if you've got things to contribute, then we'd really be interested in hearing it.
That's great. Thanks, Tristram. And David, likewise, I think people can connect with you sort of through LinkedIn. Any other places where people might find your work, or that you'd like to give a kind of shout out to, or where it's best to find you, I guess?
LinkedIn. Don't use my website anymore because that's almost dormant now, redundant. Yeah. So LinkedIn is where I would go. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, brilliant. Well, thanks to you both so much for kind of giving up the time to be here with us today. We are drawing close to the end of the show, so we are going to rapidly move on to our CDI and wider careers news. So, Sabiha, I'm going to pass straight back over to you. What's happening in the CDI this week? And David and Tristram, if you need to go, we will see you the next time we see you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe and Tristan, for joining us today. And so, as Chris said, it is now part of the show where we do the CDI news. And FYI, if you're wondering what the CDI is, maybe you've just caught this show on the hoof, or maybe you've been following us for some time and you're keen and you're interested, head on over to the website. There's information about how you can become a member. And honestly, the amount of support and the sense of community that you will get by joining the CDI it outstrips, in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, I know, the amount that you have to pay, because literally, I mean, it's a cost of coffee, frappuccino, coffee a week, and the value that you get just is phenomenal. And speaking of sort of kind of what we have coming up, it's just one more week to enter your awards nomination. Nominations for the UK Career Development Awards will close in just 1 week's time on Wednesday, the 15th of February at 5 p.m. So head over to the website. There's details about how you can enter and download the entry forms, as well as notes for how you can successfully complete the nomination. So that brings me on to story number 2, and that is at the research conference. There's still time to book a place for Thursday, the 16th of February. And it's an all-day conference, and it's taking place online from 9:15 a.m. till 4:15 p.m. And again, the website link is there. You can head on over to the website. There's a ton of information about, sort of the research conference, as well as how you can, guarantee and grab one of those tickets as well. And then finally for today, the story that I've chosen for today is really a bit of an update. You will have heard us talk about this last year, #CDI Big Listen. And so I just want to give everybody a bit of an update for those of you that perhaps haven't yet seen this update. If you have, awesome. If you haven't, though, here's the thing. So there were 317 members of the CDI and other career development professionals who completed the survey in December 2022 and in January 2023. And the focus on the perceptions of career professionals of working in the sector, it gave the CDI results to compare with the survey from November 2021. And sort of kind of overall, I won't go into the full details because you can get access to all of this on the website. Again, just head on over to the CDI and look for the #CDI Big Listen. There is going to be a summary and a report which will be published in April's edition of Careers Matters. However, what I will share with you, we'll give you a sort of kind of sneak preview. Overall, members felt that there was a slight improvement, as well as non-members felt there was slight improvement in how respondents feel about their own work. There's a lot of pride around what practitioners feel that they do and see, and how that makes a difference to the clients that they serve. However, this corresponded with a worsening across almost every measure of the profession being recognised, valued and properly funded. 86% of respondents said their work primarily in England, and just over half in schools and further education, see these results reflect mainly on the system in England. Plus, in November 2021, 28% of respondents said that they would be likely or very likely to leave the profession within 2 years, with nearly 3/4 of those saying it was driven by poor pay or retirement. That was a fall to 23% this year likely to leave, although there are still represented nearly 1/4 of the workforce. So retirement has become the top reason for leaving the profession. I'm going to leave it there for now because, I'm conscious of the time, and I know Chris has got some really great stories that he wants to share with us, you, the viewers, today. So if you are interested and you're keen and something has sparked your interest, head on over to the website. And as I say, the full sort of kind of report will be available from April this year, and there will be an article about that in the Careers Matters as well. So Chris, over to you. What great stories have you got for us this week?
That's great, thanks, Sabiha. Yeah, lots and lots going on in the CDI, and lots going on more generally across the career sphere as well. So most people obviously will be aware that this week is National Apprenticeship Week. I flashed up the wrong story. There we go. That is National Apprenticeship Week 2023. So huge amount kind of going on here, coordinated from a lot of the usual suspects. Amazing Apprenticeships have got some things out. There's a National Apprenticeship Week website, which is kind of being run by Career Map. Lots of different things going on. If you follow the hashtag NAW2023 on Twitter or any kind of social media platforms, you'll find lots of great events and activities sort of being shared across the piece. And you may have seen, obviously, this week in the news as well, the work that the government and UCAS are doing together to actually include apprenticeships now alongside the UCAS system for applying for university. So looking to try and kind of get more parity around the actual application process itself and how and where degree and higher apprenticeships are advertised. Interesting thing will be how that works with maybe employers that don't have similar deadlines to university courses, but I'm confident that it's at least a positive conversation to be having, and certainly something that we'll be kind of keeping an eye on moving forward. Second story for this week is around the recent Employability Lab sort of conference. This is a free virtual conference that was run by Handshake and Grad Consult, targeted kind of primarily at higher education careers professionals, but lots of great and really sort of useful content around things like student mental health and wellbeing and how that kind of dovetails with careers work, stuff around inclusive curriculum design. So things that can potentially kind of be fed into other careers contexts and not just HE as well. If you go onto YouTube and type in Employability Lab 2023 in the search bar, you can get all of the sessions for free via video, which is great. So do check those out if you haven't seen them already. And finally, linked a little bit to some of the stuff Tristram was talking about earlier around adult guidance and kind of, I guess, coming a little bit back to National Apprenticeship Week. There's a really great article in Wonky around the lifelong loan entitlement. So this is the idea of moving basically credits for undertaking sort of tertiary education to kind of a 4-year system where you can use that loan at any point throughout your career. That could be for micro-credentials, it could be for kind of undergraduate degrees or various other things, and how actually that might work in practicality. So really kind of important one for careers professionals to kind of be abreast of. It's certainly going to require a different approach kind of from an infrastructure perspective in terms of how we provide career guidance, and that's a government issue to solve, but something that all careers professionals definitely need to be kind of keeping an eye on moving forward. So that is our news for the week. That brings us very nicely to the end of the show. We do hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks' time on Wednesday the 22nd of Feb at 12 o'clock, where we're very excited to be joined by a guest all the way from Australia. So Lucy Satlett from Study Work Grow is going to be joining us to talk about the innovative career clusters concept that many of you may have come across on LinkedIn. So do join us for that one. It's going to be really useful to talk about those resources that can be used to inform careers practice in the UK, and in fact are already being used by some careers practitioners over here. So join us as we speak to Lucy on the 22nd of Feb, and until then, have a fantastic couple of weeks, and we look forward to seeing you in the career sphere in 2 weeks' time. Take care.